Well, hello, welcome to Family and Community Focus. I'm Kevin Miller, the Dean of Graduate School at Buffalo State. And today, we're going to talk a little bit about technology and the influence it has on family. The program that we got is sponsored by the Collaborative Research Initiative and the Institute for Community Health Promotion. And with me today to talk a little bit about this fascinating topic, actually, we're looking at technology and we're looking at the influence of family. What I hearken back to was when I was growing up, and I can remember the days, there was no internet, there was no cable TV. Computers were not part of our everyday lives. More and more social media and technology, especially those such as these cell phones, are becoming part of our everyday lives. There's no question we live in this ever-changing technology world. And the advances have impacts on our lives, society, and families. And today, we have Dr. Chris Shively from the Elementary Education, Literacy, and Education Leadership Department at Buffalo State to talk to us a little bit about what's happening and how families are spending time in this techno age. Welcome, Dr. Shively.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. Thanks for being here.
Well, it's certainly a pleasure and a treat to have you here. Before we get into some specific questions, maybe you can share a little about your background and how you got into this topic and why it's of interest to you.
The study took place because I was very interested in what was happening to my 14-year-old daughter's brain as she was doing homework, not necessarily on the computer, but with her phone next to her, and this whole idea of, I knew instinctually as a dad, this isn't the right thing to be doing, but I didn't know why. So I got interested in trying to find out what is the distractions that are happening with Snapchat, Instagram, text messaging, Facebook on her phone, because she kept having to look at it while she was trying to do her homework. So that's where it started. And then I was able to do put together some literature and some reading and do a presentation about so what are families doing with technology and kids in particular, and how is it affecting their brains, and what are the possible implications of this on our memories. So that's how I got interested in it.
This is a fascinating topic because I think there's a lot of parents, a lot of people that work with kids, adults that are working as service providers that are really fascinated by this topic and have this question that you're investigating. So how are families behaving at home around all of this?
So what I did was I gave a survey to 30 people, and how I collected the participants, I used some of my graduate students, and I asked them, I used a sampling technique called snowballing. So I gave it to 5 of my students, who then took the survey, and then I said, send this to 2 other people that I won't know. So the interesting thing about this is that the survey is not just based in the United States, it's based with families all over the country. So I collected data from a survey, and to find out, I asked how are families specifically using technologies in their home. One of the biggest things I found out was that most people in families, so every the families that I have, first of all, they're all mom, dad, and kids. So they were, except for one particular person. But the thing that was alarming, but I understand it because it's myself, is that people don't operate with one source of technology per person. It's usually 2 or 3. So you have a dad, say for example, who has his work phone, and then he has a computer, then he has his home phone, then an iPad. He's got 4 devices. All of these devices connecting to social media sites that are interrupting him, all sorts of things like that. So your question was, what are they doing?
Yeah.
I grew up in the 1970s and 80s. We didn't even have cable in the 1970s where I was. We had the 3 channels. Right now, what I found was most families are using internet-connected devices to internet streaming devices like Netflix, Hulu. They're not sitting down together and watching television over the air, number one, or on cable at a specific time to watch a specific show. They're watching whenever they want and binge watching using things like Netflix. The second thing that they're doing is that they are watching TV, I guess, or TV shows in smaller groups or alone. So they're not all sitting together as a family and watching something. So everyone's got their own little pocket because they can connect to whatever they want. They're using internet streaming devices or internet streaming applications like Pandora to listen to music, or Spotify. No one's telling me that they're watching or using CDs anymore. I know there's a group of people with the vinyl stuff, but so essentially what's happening is we are living in a world where we can get our entertainment anytime, anywhere, as much as we want, and therefore that's what people are doing.
It's equivalent to the on-demand watching.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
very much.
I equate that to sometimes when we look at computer programming and when we look at the use of Microsoft came in, you had the help feature over there, so it was on-demand help. But it sounds like people are living this on-demand as I want it, access to shows, access to whatever entertainment they like through that, or to social media and contacting people.
Not only that, but we could throw another caveat in there from the study that it's not only watching whenever they want, it's wherever they want. So I asked a question about where they would be watching some of these, just to give me a list of possibilities of where people might be watching Netflix, and it's as weird as a grocery store where they're sitting in line. You know, we have that potential, so people are taking advantage of that.
So how do they entertain themselves then? I think you kind of sort of answered that a little bit, but is there anything in particular that struck you?
I guess entertainment-wise, if we broke it down into, well, how do people get entertained? They listen to music, they watch TV, they watch movies, they play board games, things like that. It's kind of what you've expected, I think. So I already mentioned about TV and how people are watching more shows in smaller groups and families or all by themselves. Movies wasn't that way. Movies still has this family connection together. We're all going to sit down and watch The Incredibles or something like that. Whereas TV shows, everyone's got their little favorite, Netflix binge thing. As far as other entertainments go, I found something that was really interesting is that there's still a lot of people that play board games with their kids. Old-fashioned Monopoly. I would have thought that games in general were gone. I know in my house we like to play cards, my family and my kids, but that was startling that people still do stuff like that.
So there's still the contact things that are going on in terms of entertainment and all that kind of stuff. What about the communication? How are people communicating?
That's changed dramatically. So in the old days of the 70s and 80s, moms and dads didn't even know where you were half the time. And there was a sense of probably peacefulness on their end. I have an 18-year-old and a 15-year-old. I connect with them constantly when they're not with me, and I use social media, and that's what I found with everybody else. So when I say social media, I don't mean Instagram or Facebook or Snapchat. I mean text messaging. So I just send a little message to my kids, hey, where are you? They send me back a reply. Everyone in my study did the same thing. When their kids were not at home with them, they were using some type of social media to connect with.
This is an interesting point because, when cell phones first came out, we were banning them in the schools. You walked into the schools, you take them away.
Right.
Or they weren't allowed, don't bring them out at all. But it's almost like now they're part of the fabric of what's going on even in the schools. People are using them. I know you're heavily involved with technology and education and learning and how to use it successfully in schools. But it just seems that what you're mentioning struck me, that we've got to be prepared to allow the use of these things in certain situations where in the past we said no, we're not going there.
It's interesting, Kevin, because I think later on, if you get to the particular question, because we use cell phones and the notification systems on these phones so much, our brains are wired differently. So you have kids that might not be using their phones in their classroom, but what ends up happening is that their brains have been conditioned to be interrupted. Even if they're not being interrupted, they're interrupting themselves in preparation of being interrupted, and that's how our brains are starting to be wired.
Yeah, we will get into that because it is one of the questions I have.
I want to say one more thing about the communication part. one of the things that struck me was, and this was a very low percentage in my study, is how many people actually use text messaging while the kids are in their homes. So, and I'll give you an example from my own house. I don't live in a huge house, but it's big enough where if I'm making food for the kids and I want to tell my kids that it's ready and they're upstairs, I don't even yell anymore. Like, I don't even go to the stairs, I just text them. And they're both like that. They're downstairs. And I found that to not be the majority, but I did find enough people to go, other people are also texting their kids while they're in their house.
That's an interesting concept, because I think the adults, if they're not comfortable with this or not used to doing this, and they put their phone down and it's not on, ding when the text message comes.
Right.
They won't know that happens, especially if you put your phone down where it faces down. So if the kids are used to texting back and forth, or you're working with families or kids that are used to doing that stuff somehow, and that is a communication pattern they're comfortable with, and you don't do that, you could find yourself in disconnect just from the communication standpoint. Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
So if you were used to somebody giving you eye contact like you and I are doing now, and now the new norm is you talking to me, and yeah, I'm listening to you, Kevin, but I'm also paying attention to 3 other things here. For the person that's used to this is unnerving. My wife is constantly talking to my daughter, can you just do this, put your phone down so that we can talk, so I know you're listening? And I find that happens a lot when I'm with my undergraduate students or my graduate students. I have to tell them, look, when you're in class, especially if you're a parent, have your phone out. I can't tell you to put that away, it's important. But when I'm talking, there's no way that you've got your phone flipped up like this unless you come to me and tell me there's an emergency and I have to be checking my phone.
Yeah.
But it's almost a norm that I'm just talking to you and scrolling at the same time.
So there's 2 questions that I want to really get into here with our time that we've got. One is about this brain aspect of it, and 2 is setting expectations around this, helping the families to figure out what they can do with expectations. But let's finish with that one. Let's go with the one you mentioned about the brain and how that's changing, because that's something that's new to me, and I'm fascinated by that.
So I read a book, 2 really important books that were part of my study. One was by Nicholas Carr called The Shallows and What the Internet is Doing to Our Brain. That blew me out of the water, because everything that I read about that book, I'm experiencing myself. The second book was by Torkel Klingberg, and it was called The Overflowing Brain, and that's what I want to talk to you about. Mm-hmm. So if you can imagine your phone you pick up your phone, and if you're a teenager, not me, I'm 52 years old, but a teenager with Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, maybe Facebook, text messaging for sure, you're going to see a whole bunch of notifications that you have little red circles on your phone that are training you to respond to them so you can wipe them out. So what ends up happening is that what Klingberg talks about is something called info stress, where you feel stressed out because there's 57 Snapchat messages that I feel like I need to respond to because I'm on some streak with a bunch of kids. This info stress is causing kids to have more anxiety and to have kids become scatterbrained, so to speak, because they can't really focus because they're stressed out because I got to respond to these things, and if I'm engaged in a conversation like this, I'm also engaged in a conversation like this. Whereas in the old days, there was no this, it was just you and me. Right. Now I'm thinking, like, I better go look at my phone right now, I might have messages there. So Klingberg talks about this thing with info stress and how this is leading to more anxiety in young people or things like that. But what ends up happening is that because of all of these distractions, our working memory is now becoming unable, maybe that's not a strong word, but to process things to get it into long-term memory. Our thinking is fragmented, it's scattered. So every time I'm getting interrupted and I'm focusing on, let's say, something that I'm reading, I have to attend to this. And attention can either be, I better pay attention and act on it, or attention could be, I can wait for it for later. But I'm still attending to it. So there is nothing where I'm completely focused 100% on what I'm doing. I know no one has ever been like that, right. But now it's coming from all sorts of sources, and a lot of them are peers, because those peers, you want to act on those notifications from the Snapchat, Instagram, all that sort of stuff.
I think some people refer to them as, we have cognitive and associative tasks as we live. Associative tasks are like when we drive the car and we can talk to somebody because we're so good at driving the car, it's not like we got to think about it.
Right.
The cognitive task, I think is what you're referring to. I think it's what we're referring to is paying attention and being able to process information is a cognitive task, and you can't do that twice at the same time.
And if you are, you're getting bits and pieces of it rather than big chunks. So if anything does get encoded and it goes into your working memory, it might not be encoded in a fully developed concept. It could be a partial concept.
So the retrieval process could be problematic.
Right. I'll give you an example of that's happening to me. That happened today. I knew that this was going to take place. I also knew, because I use technology so much, that if I wasn't exactly sure what time or where I was supposed to go, that I could rely on Gail and send her a message that I know that she'll be looking at hours before I had to come to tell me exactly where I had to be again. So that now I have this reliance on this because I know she's trained just like me to have her phone and respond to the ding.
Right.
And so when we talked about this as a potential, this interview, the whole concept, which should have been, where is it, when is it, how am I going to get there, which part of UB, is something where I don't have to do that now because I got it in fragments is the point.
Yeah, it's the planning component then is what you're getting at, I think, is a reliance on this on-demand ability to clarify, to get information, so you don't have to remember it, you don't have to plant it in for a recall kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that's interesting for the implications for at home or working with kids, how they're thinking, and what we used to say to kids, we would tell you something, we wouldn't say, we're telling you just process it. You'd expect them to be able to pay attention and listen to you and do that.
Yeah.
What you're saying is they're being distracted or they got other elements going on.
And they also know, because everyone else is distracted and they're also responding, that in the end, reliable people are going to be looking at their phone and help you out in a pinch. That's where I see this going.
Is there a sense of peer pressure in this?
I think so. My expectations, I see this with my students. I have a student that expects me to respond to her because she's given me a urgent text message at 10 o'clock at night. Well, I go to bed early. But her expectation was, well, you should have put that in your syllabus that you won't be responding after 10 o'clock. Really? When did that become the social norm that anytime you want something? It's because we're conditioned.
Right.
And so if people are sleeping next to their phones and they wake, I see that with myself, or one of the things that people talked about in my survey was they didn't like the fact that they were expected to respond immediately, especially with a text message, And then parents, on the other hand, when they're sending out a message like, hey, where are you, Bill, or wherever you are, their child, there is the expectation of, well, that kid better be getting right back to me so I know everything is okay. Our expectations are so high because we're all connected.
The other thing we can do with the phone is track them.
Yeah, that too.
So I'll go to that last part of this thing, and we're going to kind of wrap it around this. All these implications, okay, so we talked about the brain. What's the implications for expectations, or how do we navigate this as parents or as child care providers, as people who are going to work in maybe their foster parents, all those folks? What would be the recommendation for ways to help navigate this so that we're not just leaving this to chance? We know this is happening. How can we bring it together so that it's not causing conflict, and instead we're using it in a way that's going to be advantageous to everybody?
That's the $1,000,000 question. I often think that having moms and dads aware of what the distractions are actually doing. So when you moms and dads need to know that when you're sending a message to your child, let's say in the middle of the school day, hey, don't forget, you got the dentist appointment this afternoon. You're taking their attention, whatever they're working on in working memory now is now being fragmented, and whatever that whole concept is maybe is lost at this particular moment. I've struggled in my own family with my kids who, it's like, do I take their phone away? Do we do this at homework? Whatever. I've noticed that my son is going to college today, actually, and he used to be very obsessive with his phone, and he's not now. When I talk to my other old kids whose parents have parents whose kids have kind of grown totally in this social media thing and then got out, they let it go. The kids are realizing this is a very stressful way to live. So if moms and dads know that all of these notifications are actually causing more anxiety and more fragmented thinking, then my suggestion is that you have your time when the kids can use your phone, but when it's homework time and it's things that are important for your academics, we need to be able to put that aside so you can focus on one particular thing. But as a 2018 person, I love the fact that I can connect with my kids. So I would never say, don't text your kids where they are. I think that's makes us feel connected.
I think the other thing you're mentioning too is be kind of somewhat aware as a parent or somebody like that of where the kids are. So if they're at school and you want to remind them, put a reminder in your phone to send a text, maybe at their lunchtime or after school, so you're not interrupting. Because if they hear it go off in the middle of math class or literature, something like that, they might get distracted by it. You might be setting them up.
Well, and if you do it all the time, what I found with the research I've been doing with diving more into Klingberg's book is that we're distracting ourselves even if we're not getting a distraction because we're distracted in anticipation of being distracted. Yeah. Does that make any sense?
It does, and I think we're going to have to end on that note, but man, oh man, this is fascinating. It is fascinating.
It is. Our brains are changing, no doubt about it.
As the world of technology around us changes, we're adapting to it.
Yeah.
Or, I don't know, for our betterment or for whatever. But.
Well, we are. We're just adapting perhaps in ways that are not making us feel as happy as we should.
Well, I think we can get around that, but we got to pay attention to it. We've probably got to do more research on it, and we've got more to learn about how to make it work for us.
Yeah.
I want to thank you for joining us today on the Family and Community Focus. My guest today has been Dr. Chris Shively. He's a faculty member at the Elementary Education, Literacy, and Educational Leadership Department at Buffalo State. Chris, thank you for a very fascinating conversation.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me, Kevin. I appreciate that.
We look forward to seeing you again. Thank you.